Hello and welcome to Marriott MBA Today. I'm Desiree Allard and today we have in studio Liz Dixon. Thank you for being here. Liz is a professor at the Marriott School and in her off time she does some consulting. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I do a little bit of consulting outside of the Marriott School. I'm an adjunct faculty, so I'm not a full-time teacher here at the Marriott School. So I do have a little bit of free time. And I have been doing some external consulting, particularly presentations consulting this last year with American Express. We've been working with the global banking group at American Express in both New York City, Washington, D.C., and in Salt Lake City. And we've been working with these bank presidents, vice presidents on their presentation skills. And you wouldn't think that people who are bank presidents, vice presidents would need help on their presentation skills, but that's what their board of directors asked for. So they came to us and we've been training them this last year.
Fabulous. So that's an important skill corporate-wide.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Well, in talking about presentations, what are kind of the three main components that we should think about when we are creating a presentation?
I'm glad you asked. Every presentation has three main components. Those components are message, messenger, and media.
Okay.
So let me first start with the message. The message is so important. The biggest problem that business professionals face when they are constructing a presentation is they want to throw in everything. They want to prove to boards of directors or potential investors or managers, directors, etc., customers, that they have all of the information. So I don't know exactly what my audience wants, so I'm going to give them everything.
Yeah.
We need to make that message laser focused. And what I mean by that is pinpoint exactly what it is the audience needs. And I use this metaphor when I teach my clients. When the audience wants to know what time it is, don't tell them how the clock works. But you've got to find out what it is the audience wants. You have to conduct an audience analysis and determine different audiences want different information. A board of directors is certainly going to want to have different information than, say, government regulators who are going to have more detail.
Yeah.
Different people need different information to make different decisions within the organization. And if you as the presenter can laser focus that message to that particular audience, you'll give the audience what they want. And if they want to know what time it is, don't tell them how the clock works. The second component in message is to make sure it's completely organized. We don't know where to start. My suggestion is start with a hook and pull the audience in. You have precious little time to get their attention. Some people say 15 seconds. I say fewer than 10 seconds, and your audience is going to check out, especially if the presentation comes after lunch. So you want to give some sort of attention-getting statement, a fact, an interesting statistic, a short story, making sure that it's short and relevant to the actual presentation. It can't be a gimmick. It has to be related to the actual presentation. Perhaps a quotation from one of your biggest stockholders might serve to grab your audience's attention. You then tell your audience what you will tell them. That's the agenda. It's the contract you make with the audience, and you don't break the contract. So once you've laid out the agenda, you follow that agenda with supporting data, facts, statistics, laser focus to what the audience wants. And at the end of the presentation, you remind them of where you've been. You tell them what you told them, and you close on a positive, forward-looking note. So if the message is laser-focused, audience-centered, and organized, it will be more successful. But it's not going to be as successful if you're not a good messenger. We need good messenger skills. And so many people are so nervous to get up and talk in front of people. Yeah. They say people are more frightened of getting up and speaking in public than they are of dying. I try to help my clients alleviate this fear of getting up and talking in front of people. First of all, using some stress reduction techniques. And I contend that the biggest stress reduction technique is being prepared and having that laser focused message. And I know what my audience wants, so I can go in and deliver it. But also, breathing techniques are good. mental imagery and visualization, envisioning yourself giving the presentation and seeing yourself doing it successfully and having your audience like you is a great stress reduction technique. Other techniques include things like exercising and making sure you've had an adequate hydration, things like that will help you stay less stressed during the presentation. So we want to make sure that we aren't stressed, but we also then want to make sure that we aren't monotone. We want to make sure that we practice our voice. We want to make sure that we use our voice to create emphasis and subordination, that we use our voice to convey to our audience what the important points are and perhaps what the less important points are. We don't want to be monotone throughout the presentation, so if we practice modulating our voices, then we will keep our audience's attention with that laser-focused message. The most important aspect of any messenger is the messenger's face. You want to make good eye contact with your audience. Now, you don't want to have a staring contest with somebody, but you want that good eye contact. You want to make sure you have eye contact with everyone who's in the room, but making sure that you focus on the person who you know is the decision maker in the audience. You want to have a genuine look on your face. You don't need the deer in the headlights look when you're giving a presentation, and usually the deer in the headlight, that look also goes with a monotone voice. So then we get the deer in the headlights and the monotone voice and we start talking like this, and then the audience just checks out.
Totally.
And we don't want our audience to check out. So when we have that warm expression, we look people in the eye. We understand that our audience really doesn't want us to fail. Our audience does want us to succeed. And when we find that person in the audience who's nodding the head, who's smiling at us, we smile back. And we have that genuine look, and people with a genuine look are also believable. So the more genuine the facial expression, the more believable you are and the more ethos your presentation has. The next most important component are these guys, your hands.
Ooh.
Now, generally, we play with our hands during the presentation, and this is a very common hand gesture during a presentation, and here's really how it goes. I'm so nervous up here giving this presentation, and I don't have anybody to hold my hand, so I think I'll just go ahead and hold my own hand. And I sit like this. But these hands are great storytellers. And when we use our hands purposefully, we can talk about increases, we can talk about decreases, we can talk about bringing people together, we can talk about reaching new heights. But if they're clenched or worse in our pockets, we can't use these to effectively tell the story. So we want to practice purposeful hand gestures. Now, we want to try to keep our hands somewhere within where we call the honor zone, around the shoulder to the waist area. We're not landing airplanes. We want to keep them here. And then when we're not using them, we keep them at our sides instead of in our pockets. Particularly gentlemen, because gentlemen will have keys and change in their pockets, and it will jingle. Ladies usually don't have pockets, so we don't have to worry about that as much. Finally, we want to, in as many cases as possible, stand and deliver our presentations instead of sitting and deliver our presentations. When we stand, we command the attention of those in the room, and we will get their attention. And we don't want to stand in a way that commands the attention, but we do want to stand in a way that says, here I am, I'm confident, and I'm going to give you this laser-focused message that you want. But we don't necessarily want to stand in the same place the whole time, and worse, we don't want to sway back and forth. I actually call that the BYU shuffle. When I was an undergraduate student here and I would go to dances, that's how guys would dance. Just kind of sway back and forth. Now, they're better dancers than others, but that's what I call the BYU shuffle. We don't want to do that. What I teach students to do is perhaps have a few spots on the floor strategically placed where you can start with one point and give that point, using your hand gestures, using your eye contact. And then you transition to another strategic spot on the floor where you can engage other members of the audience, and you transition from one point to the next by physically moving your body and using a verbal bridge and your hand gestures simultaneously with your voice and your facial expression to bring that audience into you. Purposeful movement instead of nervous swaying and fidgeting will keep the audience's attention. So the voice, the face, the hands, and the body movement all incorporated together make a great messenger. And finally and quickly, media. Let me first say about media. Media we sometimes call visual aid. An aid is a help. It is not the presentation itself, and it should not substitute for the presenter. If your media should fail, your presentation should stand on its own merits, and you should be able to give that presentation. Media will help guide the presentation, and as such, it should be simple, consistent, and visual. Simple, it should have less text on the page, fewer bullet points on the page, fewer lines on the page, so that the audience can absorb the information, because their brains cannot absorb all of that information, and they will lose the aspect of the laser focus message if you put all of the information on the screen.
And they'll look to you, you know, they'll look to you to tell them instead of having to read.
Exactly, and that's what, well, they'll get lost reading, and they won't come back to you as the presenter. And you want them focused on you as the presenter. We also want to make sure that our media is consistent. We want to have a consistent layout and palette and color scheme. We want to make sure that we are consistent with our fonts. We want to make sure that we're consistent in our visuals. We want to make sure that we are also consistent in our organization. I mentioned in the message section that we want to be well organized and give an agenda. If we are consistent by giving a running agenda on our media, we help the audience remember where we are in the presentation. Because like it or not, many people will be taking notes and they might lose their place and not know where you are in the presentation. But if you have on your media a running agenda, the audience can look up and say, oh, I know exactly where we are in this presentation. And they feel more comfortable because of the consistency. And finally, your media should be visual. More visual aids and less text, always. Make sure that you have consistent imagery, consistent photographs. Beware of using stock photos. I know that it's cheaper to just go in and find a Google or a Bing image, but make sure that that's not a common image, and make sure that all of the images in the PowerPoint or the media that you're using have a consistent feel to them. And also use visual triggers. And you want to make sure that you trigger your audience and that they know, oh, this is the part of that visual I should be looking at. Here is the dip perhaps in the stock price, or here is what we're shooting for. Because even when we have a visual on the screen, we want to make sure that our audience is focused in on the point of that visual that is the most important to the audience. We want to make sure that we use visual rules like the rule of thirds, where we separate our media into segments of thirds, and we make sure that we target images on those connection points and those points of intersection. And we also want to follow a consistent grid so that all of our visual aids are audience friendly, and the audience will focus in on those visual aspects far more than they will on a text aspect. So we want to make sure that we have simple, consistent, and visual, and then we want to incorporate that laser focused message, and we want to also incorporate the strong messenger techniques. And one final note, if you are standing to deliver and you do have media, you should be standing to the left of that media, if at all possible, because we read left to right and top to bottom. And if they are looking at the media, they will look at you, look at the media, and come back to you. And that's what we want them to focus on, is the presenter. And you are your most important visual aid. So if you will focus on the message and the messenger and the media, your presentations will be more successful.
Wow. What great tips you have that we can incorporate not only in business presentations at the school, but also going forward in our careers.
And you will all give presentations sometime throughout your career.
Yeah, and if we incorporate them now, we might not need consultants like you in the future kind of fixing things.
You're putting me out of work. No, I'm teasing.
But yeah, of course, incorporating that. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this series.
You're so welcome.
And thank you for joining us on this special series highlighting communication skills on Marriott MBA Today.